At home, I tried to distract myself by focusing on holiday preparations, baking cookies, hanging ornaments, and playing Christmas music in the background. For brief moments, the familiar rituals brought comfort, reminding me why the season mattered so much to me. But even during those moments, there was an undercurrent of tension, a sense that something important remained unresolved. That evening, my mother-in-law called, her voice cheerful but distant, asking about our plans for Christmas. I answered politely, keeping my tone light, even though my heart was pounding. She mentioned hosting dinner and talked about traditions she wanted to keep, but never once asked how I felt or whether I was looking forward to it. The conversation ended quickly, leaving me with more questions than answers. After hanging up, I sat in silence, staring at my phone as if it might offer clarity if I waited long enough. I wondered whether I should speak up, express my feelings, and risk an uncomfortable conversation, or continue pretending that everything was fine. Part of me feared that addressing the issue would confirm my worst suspicions, that I would hear words I wasn't ready to accept. Later that night, I watched my daughter sleeping, her face peaceful and unaware of the emotional storm unfolding around her. I promised myself that no matter what happened, I would protect her from unnecessary pain and make sure she felt loved and secure. That promise became my anchor, grounding me in a moment when everything else felt uncertain. As Christmas Eve drew closer, the tension in my chest became impossible to ignore, and I realized that avoiding the truth, whatever it might be, was no longer an option. Something was going to give, and I could sense that the days ahead would bring a revelation that would either heal old wounds or deepen them in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Christmas Eve arrived with a quiet tension that felt heavier than the winter air outside, and even though our home was filled with lights, decorations, and familiar holiday sounds, my heart felt anything but festive. I woke up early, listening to the soft hum of the heater and the distant sound of cars passing by, reminding myself that this day was supposed to be about togetherness and hope. Still, the lingering fear that I might not truly be welcome at my mother-in-law's home refused to let go. I watched my daughter eagerly pack her small bag with things she wanted to bring for the holiday, her excitement shining through in ways that both warmed and broke my heart. She talked about Grandma's house, the food, the traditions, and the memories she associated with Christmas there, completely unaware of the emotional weight I was carrying. I smiled and encouraged her enthusiasm, knowing that her happiness mattered more than my discomfort. As the day unfolded, I found myself reflecting on the countless times I had chosen peace over honesty in my relationship with my mother-in-law. I had learned to keep certain feelings to myself, to nod instead of disagree, and to avoid conversations that might lead to conflict. It wasn't that I lacked respect for her, but rather that I feared upsetting the fragile balance we had managed to maintain over the years. While preparing food to take with us, I remembered past holidays where I felt invisible, standing in the kitchen while conversations flowed around me without including my voice. I had always told myself that I was being sensitive, that not every moment needed to center around me. But now, the thought that my presence might actually be unwanted brought a sharp clarity to those memories, making them harder to dismiss. Just as we were finishing our preparations, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother-in-law. It was brief and practical, confirming the time for dinner and reminding us of a few details, but it lacked warmth. There was no mention of excitement, no reassurance, and no personal touch, and reading it made my chest tighten even more. I considered responding with a question, something simple that might open the door to an honest conversation, but I hesitated. Part of me worried that bringing up my feelings would complicate the holiday and create tension that my daughter would sense immediately. So instead, I replied politely, keeping my words neutral and safe, even though they didn't reflect what I was truly feeling. As evening approached, I sat beside my daughter while she watched a Christmas movie, her head resting against my shoulder. In that quiet moment, I realized how much I wanted this holiday to be about love and connection, not silent resentment or misunderstood intentions. I silently hoped that whatever fears I had were unfounded and that Christmas would bring clarity instead of heartbreak. That night, after my daughter had fallen asleep, I stood alone by the window, looking out at the softly falling snow. I whispered a quiet wish, not for gifts or perfection, but for understanding, for a chance to feel truly included, and for the courage to face whatever the next day might reveal. I didn't know it yet, but Christmas morning would bring an unexpected turn that would challenge everything I thought I knew about our family. Christmas morning arrived quietly, the kind of calm that feels almost sacred, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe all my worries had been unnecessary. The house was still, wrapped in soft light and the gentle glow of the tree, and as I watched my daughter run into the living room with excitement in her eyes, I reminded myself why this day mattered so much. No matter what challenges existed between adults, her joy deserved to come first. We opened gifts together, laughing and sharing simple moments that felt warm and real, and for a while, the tension I had been carrying seemed to loosen its grip. My daughter hugged me tightly, thanking me for everything, and in that embrace, I felt grounded again. It was a reminder that love, at its core, is expressed in small, sincere gestures, not in perfect family dynamics. As we got ready to leave for my mother-in-law's house, a familiar sense of unease returned, settling quietly in my chest. I chose my outfit carefully, wanting to look respectful and comfortable, hoping that my effort would reflect my desire to be part of the family. I caught my reflection in the mirror and took a deep breath, telling myself that I was allowed to take up space, even if it felt difficult. The drive over was mostly silent, broken only by my daughter's excited chatter about dinner and dessert. I listened attentively, responding with smiles and gentle comments, while my thoughts drifted between hope and fear. I wondered if my presence would be tolerated or welcomed, and whether the atmosphere would feel forced or genuine. When we arrived, my mother-in-law greeted my daughter warmly, pulling her into a hug and showering her with affection. She then turned to me with a polite smile, offering a brief greeting that felt formal rather than familiar. I told myself not to read into it, even though the contrast was hard to ignore. Inside, the house was beautifully decorated, filled with the comforting smells of holiday cooking and familiar traditions. Family members moved around, chatting and laughing, and I tried to join in where I could, contributing when appropriate and stepping back when I felt unsure. I wanted to be present without being intrusive, involved without overstepping invisible boundaries. As dinner approached, I noticed my mother-in-law watching me from across the room, her expression thoughtful and unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was evaluating me, regretting something, or simply lost in her own thoughts. The uncertainty made my heart race, and I found myself wishing for clarity, even if it came with discomfort. During dinner, conversations flowed easily, but I felt like I was constantly measuring my words, careful not to say anything that might be misunderstood. My daughter, oblivious to the tension, laughed freely, her happiness a small comfort in a room that felt emotionally crowded. I focused on her, letting her joy anchor me in the moment. As the evening wore on, I sensed that something was building beneath the surface, something unspoken that was waiting for the right moment to emerge. I didn't know whether that moment would bring resolution or reveal a deeper divide, but I could feel that the truth, whatever it was getting closer. As the evening continued, I tried to relax into the rhythm of the gathering, reminding myself that not every moment needed to carry meaning or tension. Plates were cleared, dessert was served, and familiar holiday music played softly in the background, creating an atmosphere that looked perfect from the outside. Yet inside, I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for something to shift. My mother-in-law moved around the room, checking on guests and making sure everything was just right, her role as host clearly important to her. I watched her carefully, noticing small gestures I had overlooked in the past, the way she paused before speaking to me, the way her eyes softened when she looked at my daughter. Those moments made me wonder if there was more happening beneath the surface than I had assumed. At one point, she asked me to help her in the kitchen, and my heart skipped a beat. It felt like an invitation and a test all at once. I followed her quietly, my thoughts racing as I tried to prepare myself for whatever conversation might unfold. The kitchen was warm and bright, a contrast to the emotional distance I felt between us. As we worked side by side, there was an awkward silence that stretched longer than it should have. I could hear the sounds of laughter from the other room, reminding me that life was continuing as normal for everyone else. I wondered if she would bring up the past, address the tension, or simply talk about practical things and let the moment pass. She finally spoke, her voice calm but serious, commenting on how quickly my daughter was growing and how proud she felt of her. I nodded, agreeing, grateful for a topic that felt safe. But there was something in her tone that suggested she wanted to say more, something personal that she wasn't quite ready to voice. I took a small risk and thanked her for inviting us, telling her how much it meant to my daughter to be there. The words came out carefully, measured, but sincere. For a brief moment, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, a mix of surprise and vulnerability that caught me off guard. She didn't respond right away, instead focusing on arranging dishes and wiping the counter, as if gathering her thoughts. The silence returned, heavier this time, filled with things left unsaid. I felt my chest tighten, unsure whether I had crossed a line or opened a door. When we returned to the living room, the mood felt subtly different, as if something had shifted without anyone else noticing. My mother-in-law sat closer to us, engaging more directly in conversation, and for the first time that evening, I felt a flicker of cautious hope. Still, the sense that a deeper truth remained unspoken lingered in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the next day would bring clarity in a way I wasn't prepared for. Whatever was coming, it would force us to confront our assumptions and redefine what family truly meant. We returned home late that night, the quiet of our house feeling louder than usual after hours of forced cheer and careful conversation. My daughter was tired but happy, chatting about the food, the decorations, and the little moments that had made her Christmas feel special. I listened, nodding along, grateful that at least her memories of the day were untouched by the tension I had been carrying. After tucking her into bed, I sat alone in the living room, the glow of the Christmas tree casting soft shadows across the walls. I replayed the evening in my mind, searching for meaning in every glance, every pause, every word my mother-in-law had spoken. The brief conversation in the kitchen stood out, leaving me with more questions than answers and a growing sense that something important had been left unsaid. As I scrolled through my phone, a notification popped up, a message from my mother-in-law sent just minutes after we had left. My heart raced as I opened it, unsure whether I was ready for what it might contain. The message was short but unexpected, thanking me for coming and saying she was glad we were there. It wasn't an apology or an explanation, but it was more warmth than I had felt from her in a long time. I stared at the screen for several moments, letting the words sink in. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, to open the door to a deeper conversation, but another part hesitated, afraid of pushing too hard or misreading her intentions. I replied politely, expressing gratitude and wishing her a good night, keeping my response safe and measured. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake, thinking about how easily misunderstandings can grow when people avoid honest conversations. I wondered how much of the tension between us was rooted in assumptions, and how much was the result of fear on both sides. The idea that we might both be guarding ourselves in different ways felt both sad and strangely comforting. The next morning, I woke up to a sense of restlessness, as if something unresolved was hovering just out of reach. My daughter, still riding the excitement of Christmas, asked if we would see Grandma again soon, her voice filled with hope. I told her we would, even though I wasn't entirely sure what that would look like. Later that day, I noticed a missed call from my mother-in-law. Seeing her name on my screen made my heart skip, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something told me that avoiding her now would only prolong the uncertainty I'd been living with. I took a deep breath and called her back, bracing myself for whatever the conversation might bring. She answered quickly, her tone different than usual, softer and more tentative. She asked how we were doing and whether my daughter had enjoyed herself, questions that felt genuine rather than obligatory. As we spoke, I sensed that she was working up the courage to say something more, something that might finally bring clarity to the situation. By the time we hung up, nothing concrete had been resolved, but I felt a shift, a subtle change in the dynamic between us. It was as if we were both standing at the edge of an honest conversation, aware that stepping forward would require vulnerability and courage from us both. The following day began like any other quiet holiday morning, but beneath the surface, I felt a growing sense of anticipation I couldn't quite explain. My daughter played in the living room, humming to herself as she rearranged her new toys, completely at ease, while my mind remained occupied with the unanswered questions from the night before. The missed call, the brief conversation, and the subtle shift in my mother-in-law's tone all lingered in my thoughts. Around midday, there was a knock at the door that immediately made my heart race. Visitors were rare the day after Christmas, and something about the timing felt significant. I opened the door to find my mother-in-law standing there, bundled in her coat, a nervous smile on her face and a small gift bag in her hand. The sight of her caught me completely off guard. She stepped inside slowly, glancing around as if she hadn't been in our home for a long time. My daughter ran toward her, thrilled by the surprise visit, and my mother-in-law hugged her tightly, laughing and showering her with affection. Watching them together stirred a mix of emotions in me, joy, relief, and a lingering uncertainty about why she was really there. Once my daughter settled back into her play, my mother-in-law turned to me, her expression more serious now. She asked if we could talk privately, her voice quiet but firm. I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach as I led her into the kitchen, the same place where so many unspoken moments had lingered the night before. She began by apologizing for stopping by unannounced, explaining that she had barely slept and couldn't stop thinking about our conversation, or rather, our lack of one. She admitted that she had sensed distance between us for a long time but hadn't known how to address it without making things worse. Hearing her acknowledge the tension felt both validating and overwhelming. Then she said something I hadn't expected at all. She told me that she had been afraid of pushing me away, not the other way around, and that she worried her expectations and strong personality had made me feel unwelcome. Her voice wavered as she spoke, revealing a vulnerability I had never seen in her before. I listened quietly, my own emotions rising as she explained that she never meant to exclude me from Christmas or make me feel unwanted. She confessed that she often assumed I preferred keeping my distance, interpreting my politeness as disinterest rather than respect. In that moment, it became painfully clear how easily misunderstandings can grow when both sides are too afraid to speak honestly. As she finished speaking, the room fell silent, heavy with emotion and the weight of years of miscommunication. I realized that the bombshell my daughter had dropped wasn't rooted in rejection, but in a child's attempt to make sense of emotional distance she couldn't fully understand. That realization shifted everything. Before I could respond, my mother-in-law reached into her bag and handed me the small gift she had brought. She said it was a late Christmas present, not just for me, but for us, a symbol of her desire to start fresh. I took it with trembling hands, feeling a mix of gratitude, relief, and sadness for all the time we had lost to silence. At that moment, I knew this conversation was the turning point, the unexpected twist that would redefine our relationship and the meaning of family in ways I hadn't anticipated. After that conversation, a weight I hadn't fully realized I was carrying seemed to lift, leaving a strange mix of relief and reflection in its place. My mother-in-law and I stood in the kitchen for a few moments longer, just breathing and letting the silence speak for itself. It was not a magical fix, but it was the beginning of something I had longed for, a chance to truly understand each other and rebuild the bond that had been strained by years of unspoken tension. I looked at her, really looked, noticing the subtle lines around her eyes and the small gestures she made when she thought no one was watching. For the first time, I saw her not just as my mother-in-law, but as a person navigating her own insecurities, expectations, and fears. And just like that, my perspective shifted. Family isn't about perfection, it's about effort, understanding, and the willingness to bridge gaps even when it feels uncomfortable. We returned to the living room, my daughter bouncing with energy, and I watched as my mother-in-law knelt down to play with her. The warmth in their interaction reminded me why holidays mattered, not for decorations or gifts, but for the shared moments of connection, laughter, and love. It was a reminder that even small gestures can heal wounds when approached with sincerity. I sat beside them, joining in the play and conversation, feeling a sense of inclusion I hadn't experienced before. The house, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now seemed lighter, more open. Every smile, every shared laugh, felt like a small step toward a relationship that had been long overdue for repair. As the day progressed, we shared stories, exchanged gifts, and prepared a late Christmas dinner together. The conversation flowed more easily now, with honesty replacing assumptions. My mother-in-law asked questions about our lives, and I found myself responding openly, unafraid to share both joys and struggles. The atmosphere had shifted, and it felt like a true Christmas miracle, not the kind wrapped in ribbons and bows, but the kind wrapped in understanding and reconciliation. By the evening, our home felt alive with warmth and connection. I watched my daughter play with her new toys while my mother-in-law and I chatted, realizing that the tension I had feared was no longer a barrier. It became clear that misunderstandings had shaped our past interactions more than reality ever had, and that a willingness to communicate could dissolve long-held fears. I reflected on how quickly assumptions can distort reality, how a single comment from a child can expose hidden insecurities, and how much courage it takes to confront those feelings honestly. Family relationships are delicate, requiring patience, empathy, and a readiness to see the world through someone else's eyes. And sometimes, the most meaningful gifts are the ones that bring understanding rather than material items. As night fell, my daughter snuggled beside us, tired but happy, and I realized that this Christmas would remain unforgettable, not because of perfect execution or elaborate plans, but because it marked a turning point. A point where hearts opened, misunderstandings were cleared, and the fragile threads of family connection were strengthened in ways that would last far beyond the holiday season. The following morning, our home felt calm in a way that was both comforting and surprising. The tension that had hovered over the past few days had lifted, leaving room for laughter, storytelling, and quiet moments of reflection. My daughter woke up bright-eyed, eager to share the previous day's memories, her excitement filling every corner of the house. Watching her, I realized that this Christmas had become more than a holiday. It had become a lesson in patience, understanding, and the unpredictable nature of family. I found my mother-in-law in the kitchen, quietly preparing coffee, her movements unhurried. She smiled when she saw me, a smile that felt genuine and free of the tension that had marked our previous interactions. It was a small but significant change, a silent acknowledgement that something had shifted between us. For the first time in years, I felt seen and appreciated, not just as a daughter-in-law but as a human being navigating the complexities of family life. We spent the morning talking, sharing memories from past Christmases, laughing at old mishaps, and discussing hopes for the future. The conversation flowed naturally, without the careful calculation and hesitancy that had defined our interactions in the past. It was clear that the simple act of opening up, of being honest about feelings and fears, had created a bridge that was strong enough to support genuine connection. My daughter sat between us, soaking in the warmth of the moment, her eyes shining with happiness. She didn't need words to understand the transformation. She felt it in the atmosphere, in the laughter that filled the room, and in the gentle interactions between the two most important women in her life. Seeing them together, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and relief, knowing that my daughter's childhood memories would be filled with love rather than conflict. As the day progressed, we decided to cook a special holiday meal together. Cooking side by side, sharing tasks, and exchanging stories about past experiences created a rhythm that felt natural and unforced. Each small gesture, a shared smile, a compliment, a helping hand, built upon the foundation of understanding we had begun to lay the previous evening. At one point, my mother-in-law turned to me and said softly, "I've been meaning to tell you how much I appreciate you, and I'm sorry for the times I may have made you feel unwelcome." Her words, simple yet heartfelt, struck a chord deep within me. I realized that apologies and recognition, even after years of unspoken tension, had the power to heal wounds that I thought would linger indefinitely. I responded with my own words of gratitude, acknowledging the effort she had made and the care she had shown. We didn't dwell on past mistakes, but instead, we celebrated the present moment, choosing to focus on love, family, and the joy of being together. It was a powerful reminder that family dynamics are not fixed. They can evolve, improve, and flourish with intentional communication and understanding. The rest of the day passed in a blur of warmth, laughter, and togetherness. We shared stories, sang songs, and created small traditions that felt both familiar and newly meaningful. My daughter's laughter echoed through the house, a reminder of why these moments matter more than perfection or obligation. By evening, as we sat together enjoying the calm after the excitement, I realized that this Christmas had given us more than gifts or festive cheer. It had given us clarity, reconciliation, and a renewed sense of connection. The bond between my mother-in-law and me, once strained by assumptions and unspoken tensions, had begun to mend, and I knew that our relationship would never be quite the same again. The evening continued quietly, filled with soft conversations, shared smiles, and moments of simple connection that had been absent for far too long. I watched my daughter curl up on the couch with her favorite blanket, her eyes sparkling with contentment, and realized that the magic of Christmas wasn't in the presents or decorations, but in these small, meaningful moments of togetherness. Seeing her so happy, I felt a sense of relief and fulfillment that was impossible to capture with words. My mother-in-law sat across from me, her posture relaxed, her smile warm, and for the first time, I felt that unspoken wall between us had begun to crumble. We spoke about memories, childhood stories, and funny holiday mishaps, the conversation flowing freely without the usual careful consideration that had marked our past interactions. It was remarkable how honesty and vulnerability could transform a relationship that once felt complicated into something familiar and comforting. Throughout the evening, I noticed the subtle ways she made an effort to include me, from asking my opinions to inviting me to participate in traditions she had previously assumed I might not want to join. Each gesture, no matter how small, felt like a bridge being built, a silent message that our bond mattered and was worth nurturing. I realized that so much of family dynamics relies on these little acts of acknowledgement and intentional care. My daughter bounced between us, excitedly showing off her gifts, sharing stories, and occasionally pausing to look at the adults around her, soaking in the warmth and love that finally felt authentic. Her laughter became a soundtrack for the evening, reminding me of why I had worked so hard to make this holiday special, despite the fear and uncertainty that had weighed on me. At one point, my mother-in-law turned to me and said something that I had been longing to hear for years. "I've made mistakes, and I know we haven't always understood each other, but I want you to know that you are important to me." The sincerity in her voice resonated deeply, and I felt a rush of emotion, a mix of gratitude, relief, and hope for the future. I responded in kind, sharing my own feelings and acknowledging that while the past had been complicated, the present moment offered an opportunity for a fresh start. We didn't dwell on previous misunderstandings or assign blame. Instead, we celebrated the fact that we were choosing connection over conflict, love over assumptions, and family over pride. As the night drew on, we gathered around the Christmas tree once more, sharing stories, singing quietly, and reflecting on the year that had passed. I noticed how my mother-in-law interacted with my daughter, her gestures tender and patient, a side of her that I hadn't fully appreciated before. It was a reminder that people are often more complex than we perceive, and that taking the time to understand them can reveal warmth and love hidden beneath layers of habit or fear. By the time we said our goodbyes, hugs were longer, smiles were more genuine, and a sense of peace had settled over us. I knew that the path forward wouldn't always be perfect, but that the willingness to communicate, to be vulnerable, and to prioritize family over pride had changed everything. My daughter had witnessed a reconciliation that would stay with her for a lifetime, and I had gained clarity, understanding, and a renewed sense of connection with my mother-in-law. As we settled back into our quiet home, I reflected on the lessons this Christmas had taught me, that misunderstandings can grow silently, that honesty and vulnerability are powerful tools, and that family is worth every effort to bridge gaps, even when it feels uncomfortable. This holiday had become more than a celebration. It had become a turning point, a memory of love, reconciliation, and hope that would shape the way we approached future holidays together. The next morning, our home felt lighter than it had in years, as though the weight of misunderstandings had finally been lifted. My daughter was up early, already immersed in her holiday toys, her laughter echoing through the house and filling every corner with joy. Watching her, I realized that the magic of the season wasn't in presents or decorations, but in the genuine connections and love shared among family members. Her happiness became a mirror, reflecting the healing that had begun to take place between my mother-in-law and me. I spent the morning preparing breakfast, glancing occasionally at the ornaments on the tree and the small handmade decorations that my daughter had lovingly crafted. Each item told a story, each light reflected memories of past holidays, and each smile reminded me of the moments that truly mattered. It was a quiet, reflective start to the day, one that emphasized the beauty of simple, meaningful family moments. My mother-in-law called shortly after, checking in to see how we were doing. Her voice was warm, relaxed, and easy, a far cry from the tension-filled conversations of the past. We spoke casually about the previous day, laughing at small incidents and acknowledging the effort each of us had made to make the holiday special. The conversation reinforced my belief that relationships, even strained ones, can change when both sides are willing to listen and understand. Later, my daughter and I decided to write thank you notes for the gifts we had received. As we sat together, she asked thoughtful questions about family traditions and the meaning behind each decoration on the tree. I answered as honestly as I could, sharing both memories of past holidays and hopes for the future. It was a simple activity, yet it became a moment of teaching, reflection, and bonding that deepened our connection. In the afternoon, we received another surprise visit from my mother-in-law, who had brought along a small dessert she had made herself. The gesture was simple, but it spoke volumes. It was a tangible expression of her desire to strengthen our relationship, to show care and thoughtfulness without expectation. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, realizing that actions often speak louder than words when it comes to mending relationships. We spent the rest of the day together, playing games, sharing stories, and enjoying the comfort of being in each other's company. Every laugh, every shared glance, every small act of kindness built a bridge that had been missing for far too long. It was clear that the events of the previous days had not just resolved tension, but had created a foundation for future understanding and closeness. As the sun began to set, I found a quiet moment to reflect on the journey we had experienced. I realized that the misunderstanding my daughter had shared was not a reflection of reality, but rather a catalyst for honest communication, vulnerability, and reconnection. It reminded me that sometimes children notice things adults overlook, prompting conversations and actions that can transform family dynamics for the better. By evening, our home was filled with a sense of peace, joy, and genuine connection. My daughter was happily engaged in her toys, my mother-in-law and I exchanged warm smiles, and I felt an unspoken understanding pass between us. This Christmas had become a story of reconciliation, empathy, and love, one that would remain etched in our hearts for years to come. The following morning, our home felt lighter, as if a weight of old misunderstandings had finally lifted. My daughter was already playing with her new toys, her laughter filling every corner of the house. Watching her, I realized that the true magic of Christmas wasn't in presents or decorations, but in the moments of love and connection we share as a family. Her happiness reflected the healing that had begun between my mother-in-law and me. I spent the morning preparing breakfast, glancing at the tree and the small decorations my daughter had crafted. Each ornament reminded me of past holidays, the memories, and the effort it takes to maintain family bonds. It was a quiet, reflective start, emphasizing the beauty of simple, meaningful moments over perfection. Later, my mother-in-law called to check in. Her voice was warm and relaxed, a clear contrast to the tension-filled conversations of the past. We laughed over small incidents from the previous day and acknowledged the effort each of us had made to make the holiday special. I realized that relationships, even strained ones, can change when both sides are willing to communicate and understand. In the afternoon, she surprised us with a visit, bringing a small dessert she had made herself. The gesture was simple, yet meaningful, showing her desire to strengthen our bond without expectation. We spent the rest of the day together, playing games, sharing stories, and enjoying each other's company. Every smile and small act of kindness felt like a bridge being rebuilt. By evening, our home was filled with peace and genuine connection. My daughter played happily, my mother-in-law and I exchanged warm smiles, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude. This Christmas had become more than just a holiday. It was a story of reconciliation, understanding, and love that would remain in our hearts for years to come. The next morning, I woke up feeling a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. The tension and fear from the past week seemed distant, replaced by a warm sense of connection. My daughter ran around the house, excited and full of energy, reminding me that children often sense what adults cannot yet express. Her happiness was proof that family bonds, when nurtured, can heal and grow stronger. My mother-in-law and I shared quiet moments throughout the day, speaking honestly and openly for the first time in a long time. We laughed about old memories, shared hopes for the future, and acknowledged the unspoken misunderstandings that had caused tension in the past. It was a reminder that relationships are built not just on love, but also on communication, patience, and empathy. Later, we cooked together, exchanged small gifts, and played with my daughter, who soaked up every moment. The house was filled with laughter and warmth, a clear contrast to the anxiety I had felt just days before. It became clear that the true meaning of Christmas lies in shared joy, understanding, and the willingness to reconnect even after misunderstandings. As evening approached, we all sat together, enjoying a quiet moment of reflection. I felt grateful for the reconciliation, for the lessons learned, and for the opportunity to create memories that would stay with us forever. This Christmas had been transformative, showing me that even complicated family dynamics can shift with patience, honesty, and love. Finally, I realized that the bond between my mother-in-law, my daughter, and me had grown stronger. Misunderstandings that once loomed large had been replaced by empathy and connection. It was a Christmas that taught me the value of communication, the importance of understanding, and the power of family to overcome obstacles and celebrate together. The days following Christmas felt lighter and more joyful than I had expected. The tension that had hung over our family like a shadow seemed to vanish completely, replaced by understanding, warmth, and laughter. My daughter continued to share stories of our holiday, her excitement undimmed, and I realized that these small, genuine moments of happiness were what mattered most. Gifts, decorations, and traditions were secondary to the love and connection we had rebuilt. My mother-in-law and I found a new rhythm in our relationship, one built on honesty, patience, and mutual respect. The walls that had kept us distant slowly crumbled as we made an effort to communicate more openly and appreciate each other's perspectives. I finally understood that family is rarely perfect, but its strength lies in the willingness to forgive, reconnect, and support each other even when misunderstandings occur. We spent quiet mornings sharing coffee and conversation, afternoons playing with my daughter, and evenings reflecting on our days. Every gesture, no matter how small, became a reminder of the importance of empathy and genuine connection. It was incredible to see how quickly relationships could improve when vulnerability was met with understanding rather than judgment. Looking back, I realized that my daughter's innocent comment about Christmas had been a blessing in disguise. It forced me to confront fears and assumptions I hadn't faced, ultimately opening the door to meaningful dialogue and reconciliation. What initially felt like a painful moment became the catalyst for healing, teaching all of us the true meaning of family, love, and the holidays. As the new year approached, I felt gratitude for the lessons learned, for the bonds strengthened, and for the memories created that would stay with us forever. I knew that future holidays would continue to have their challenges, but I also knew that we now had the tools, honesty, patience, and understanding, to navigate them successfully. If you've ever experienced tension or misunderstandings with family during the holidays, remember that it's never too late to rebuild connections. Open your heart, have honest conversations, and focus on the love that brought you together in the first place. Family is worth the effort, and moments of reconciliation are more precious than any gift under the tree. I'd love to hear your family stories, both the challenging ones and the heartwarming ones. Share them in the comments below, and let's celebrate the beauty of connection, forgiveness, and love together. And if you want to learn more about navigating tough family dynamics, check out my next story on how honesty and vulnerability can transform relationships forever. Most people think Christmas is the season of joy, warmth, and togetherness, but what no one really talks about is how the holidays have a strange way of exposing the cracks in even the strongest families, and sometimes the people who are supposed to love each other the most end up hurting each other without even realizing it. Every year, millions of families sit around decorated trees and dinner tables, smiling for photos while silently carrying old wounds, unspoken tensions, and misunderstandings that have been buried for years. I never imagined that our Christmas would begin not with excitement or laughter, but with a single sentence that would quietly shake my heart and make me question my place in my own family. My daughter and I have always been inseparable, the kind of mother-daughter duo that people smile at when they see us together because our bond feels natural and unbreakable. She is bright, observant, and honest to a fault, the kind of child who notices everything adults try to hide and says things out loud that others only think in their heads. I've always encouraged her to speak her truth, believing honesty was a strength, even though deep down I knew that sometimes the truth can cut deeper than silence. She is my world, my constant reminder of why I try to be better every day, especially when life gets complicated. My mother-in-law, however, has always been a complicated chapter in my story, someone I've tried to understand for years without ever fully succeeding. She isn't cruel or unkind in obvious ways, but she has a way of making her presence felt through subtle comments, quiet expectations, and a strong belief that things should be done her way. Over the years, we've shared polite conversations, forced smiles, and moments of genuine connection that never seemed to last long enough. I've always told myself that family doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful, and that effort matters more than comfort. As Christmas approached, our home slowly filled with decorations, soft lights, and the familiar scent of cinnamon and pine, but underneath it all, there was an uneasiness I couldn't explain. I brushed it off at first, telling myself it was just holiday stress, the pressure of trying to make everything perfect for my daughter while balancing work, responsibilities, and expectations. I wanted this Christmas to feel magical for her, to be one she would remember fondly no matter what happened in the future. Then one quiet afternoon, completely out of nowhere, my daughter looked up at me with a serious expression that didn't match her age and said something that made my heart skip a beat. Her voice was calm, almost casual, as if she were stating a simple fact, but the words she spoke carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. She told me that her grandma didn't want me around for Christmas, and in that moment, the room felt colder despite the warmth of the holiday lights glowing around us. At first, I laughed it off, assuming she had misunderstood something or was repeating a thought that hadn't fully formed in her mind. I asked her gently what she meant, trying not to show how deeply her words had unsettled me. She shrugged, looking unsure, and said it was just a feeling she had, something she thought her grandma believed. Children have a way of sensing emotions adults try to hide, and that's what scared me the most. I told myself not to overthink it, reminding myself that kids sometimes jump to conclusions and that it probably meant nothing. Still, as the day went on, her words replayed in my mind over and over again, slowly planting doubt where there had once been cautious optimism. I wondered if there were conversations I wasn't part of, feelings I hadn't noticed, or assumptions being made about me without my knowledge. That night, as I lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the house, I couldn't help but reflect on every interaction I'd ever had with my mother-in-law. I replayed old disagreements, awkward holidays, and moments where I might have said the wrong thing or failed to meet an expectation I never fully understood. The more I thought about it, the heavier my chest felt, as if a simple childhood comment had opened the door to years of unresolved tension. By the time morning came, I told myself I would push those thoughts aside and focus on what truly mattered, my daughter's happiness and the spirit of the season. But deep down, something had shifted, and I knew that this Christmas was already unfolding differently than I had imagined, setting the stage for a journey I wasn't ready for but couldn't avoid. The next few days passed in a strange emotional fog, the kind where everything looks normal on the outside but feels slightly off on the inside, like walking through your own life as an observer instead of a participant. I went about my routine, making breakfast, helping my daughter with schoolwork, answering emails, and checking items off my to-do list, yet my mind kept drifting back to that one sentence she had said so casually. It was as if those words had found a quiet corner in my thoughts and refused to leave, no matter how hard I tried to ignore them. Every time my daughter mentioned Christmas plans or asked about decorations, I felt a small knot tighten in my stomach, even though I smiled and responded with enthusiasm. I didn't want my worry to become her worry, and I certainly didn't want to plant any ideas in her mind that could make her feel torn between people she loved. So I kept my concerns to myself, convincing myself that being a parent sometimes means carrying emotional weight silently for the sake of your child's happiness. Still, the doubt kept growing, especially when I thought about my mother-in-law and the complicated history we shared. From the very beginning, our relationship had been shaped by unspoken expectations and quiet comparisons, the kind that never lead to open arguments but slowly build invisible walls. She had raised her son with strong values and firm traditions, and while I respected that, I often felt like I was being measured against a standard I didn't fully understand. There were moments in the past when I felt genuinely welcomed by her, like the time she complimented a dinner I cooked or proudly told friends how well my daughter was doing in school. But those moments were always followed by subtle reminders that I was still an outsider in certain ways, someone who hadn't quite earned a permanent place in her world. I told myself this was normal, that many families struggle with these dynamics, especially during the holiday, when emotions run high. As Christmas inched closer, the pressure to make everything perfect intensified, and I found myself questioning every small decision. Should we spend more time at her house, or would that make things worse? Was my presence really unwanted, or was this all just a misunderstanding fueled by stress and imagination? I wanted to ask her directly, to clear the air once and for all, but fear held me back, fear of confirming something I wasn't ready to face. One evening, while wrapping gifts at the kitchen table, I noticed my daughter watching me with a thoughtful expression. She asked if I was okay, her voice soft and concerned, and in that moment, I realized how deeply she was paying attention to my emotional state. I reassured her that everything was fine, pulling her into a hug and promising that Christmas was going to be special no matter what. I meant every word, even though part of me wasn't sure how that promise would unfold. Late that night, after my daughter had gone to bed, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone, pictures of past holidays where smiles felt both real and forced at the same time. I saw my mother-in-law standing just a little apart from me in group photos, close enough to be family but distant enough to feel separate. Those images stirred a mix of nostalgia and sadness, reminding me how fragile family connections can be when they're built on assumptions instead of understanding. I tried to convince myself that children sometimes misinterpret adult emotions and that my daughter's comment didn't necessarily reflect reality. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that even the possibility of being unwelcome hurt more than I expected. Christmas, after all, is supposed to be about belonging, and the idea that I might not fully belong in my own extended family cut deeper than I wanted to admit. By the time I finally turned off the lights and lay down to sleep, my mind was buzzing with unanswered questions and quiet fears. I didn't know it yet, but these moments of doubt were leading me toward a confrontation with the past, and soon, an unexpected turn of events would force all of us to face emotions we had been avoiding for far too long. As the days continued to slip by, I began noticing small things that I might have ignored before, moments that suddenly felt heavier now that doubt had taken root in my mind. A delayed reply to a message, a shorter phone call than usual, or a conversation that felt oddly surface level all seemed to confirm a fear I didn't want to acknowledge. I knew I might be reading too much into everything, but once insecurity settles in, it has a way of turning ordinary interactions into silent evidence. I thought back to the early years of my marriage, when I was still trying to figure out my place in the family and prove, both to myself and to others, that I was worthy of being there. My mother-in-law had always been polite, even generous at times, but affection from her felt conditional, like something that had to be earned and constantly maintained. I worked hard to meet her expectations, often putting my own comfort aside in the process, believing that effort would eventually turn into acceptance. There were holidays in the past when I felt like a guest instead of family, carefully choosing my words, watching my tone, and second-guessing every reaction. I told myself that this was just how some families operated, that love didn't always look warm and effortless. But now, hearing my daughter's innocent yet painful comment, all those memories resurfaced with new clarity, making me wonder if I had been ignoring signs for years. One afternoon, while driving home from school pickup, my daughter asked if Grandma was excited about Christmas this year. Her question was simple, but my answer felt complicated. I told her that I hoped so, choosing my words carefully, aware that she was trying to make sense of adult emotions through a child's lens. I didn't want her to feel caught in the middle, yet I couldn't deny that she already was, simply by being observant and emotionally aware.